What can I say to make you understand? You're driving me mad. Baby, 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 'cause I want to be your loving man. Oh, how will it feel to be in your arms? How will it be? Okay, everybody. Good morning, and sorry for the little bit of delay. We're having a little trouble getting one of our panelists logged in. So welcome to the Ortega Park Mural Rescue Project Forum and Panel. We're really excited to have some very distinguished guests with us today, presenting information around the historic significance of the murals in Ortega Park. There's a lot to unpack. We only have a little bit over an hour. We've scheduled this for an hour and a half. So this is a webinar type of a meeting where just the panelists with some guests will be making comments and speaking while everybody else will have to listen in. There will be some information at the end where you'll be able to send us some information if you want to follow up with us on this, but I can tell you right now that this struggle is far from over. Even though we experienced a huge victory on Wednesday when the Historic Landmark Commission asked the city to continue this item and get back with the community and figure out the best way to preserve the work and look at this, designating the park as a cultural resource, the city has decided to go forward with a grant application to the state of California Parks for an $8.5 million grant to renovate the park without any consideration of what the Historic Landmark Commission said on Wednesday. This is disturbing because if City Council approves the grant application and the city is awarded the 8.5 million, the city will be locked into whatever it proposes. So we don't know, or we do know now based on what we saw in the staff report, that there's no mention of full preservation of the murals. And so we're in a dogfight right now. And so we've worked really hard to get us this far, but really, we're really gonna have to organize and make a call for action to demonstrate the significance and the sensitivity around this cultural and ethnic work. With that said, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Marcus Lopez Sr. for some brief comments. Marcus.
Thank you, everybody. I'm lighting this sage for everyone to have clear minds with their good spirits and their heart in order to have some good conversations to protect not only these murals, but also just like what we talk about within Chicano Park down in San Diego, the respect for the Kumeyaay and their respect for the Chumash nations. Remembering our history, our stories to undo the untruths to heal. Ortega Park is not only a park, but also our histories, reflection our histories. To defeat oppression, we need to be liberated. To liberate, we need truth. Murals are the voice of the truth. What the muralist did, in particular, my good friend Manuel Sueta, what he did needs to be not only preserved, but needs to be circulated and increased. The young muralists need to increase those murals, need to increase the voice of the people, need to increase the voice of what this really means. To be liberated means to tell our stories. Your stories are important. Our stories are important. With that note, this sage represents just the beginning. And this song is a song of healing. Imawe Shadipa, Imawe, Imawe Shadipa, Imawe, Imawe Shadipa, Imawe, Imawe Shadipa, Imawe. The song says, for truth, peace, and tranquility. So we give the peace and tranquility to our voices, and these mirrors reflect that very thought. So thank you, Mr. Alvarez, for including not only the Chumash Nation in our territories in this conversation. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Alvarez. Thank you very much for recognizing our nation and the Kumeyaay Nation, the people that work so hard down in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to turn it over to District Representative Blanca Figueroa, representing Congressman Salud Carvajal. Blanca?
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. My name is Blanca Figueroa, and I am here today on behalf of Congressman Salud Carvajal. He intended to take part of this of today's event, but unfortunately, his travel schedule changed, and he's unable to connect with us today. He asked me to express on his behalf the sincere gratitude he has for the work of the One Community Bridge Project and members of the Santa Barbara community for advocating to preserve the Ortega Park murals, as they are an integral part of the history of the East Side and the city of Santa Barbara. He asked me to share the following message. The murals represent the rich social and cultural history of this community. They represent generations of people who have kept this community together, from our ancestors to our parents who work as campesinos, to the families that we now raise here. The preservation of the Chicano history will allow us to continue telling the stories of our roots and culture. Though this decision is ultimately in the hands of the City Historic Landmark Commission and not federal jurisdiction, as a member of this community, I recognize the importance of protecting our local artist work that reflect our heritage and distinct identity. The decision by the Commission to continue obtaining public input on the future of the mural is promising, and I thank you all of you who have taken the time to advocate continuously on their preservation. I look forward to viewing this meeting in the near future and learning from the panelists' presentations that will follow. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Blanca.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and now ask our District 1 City Council Representative, Alejandra Gutierrez, to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be participating in this forum. One of my biggest motivations for running for City Council has been to be able to be more of a voice for the community, and preserving the murals in Ortega Park are very dear to my heart, just like everybody else in my district. And I think it's very important that the city of Santa Barbara starts to listen to the community and listen to their needs and wants before taking any actions. And I think, unfortunately, this is an example of when the city doesn't listen to the community. So I'm really excited to hear all the wonderful guest speakers and the community. And hopefully this is a battle that we will win. Thank you, Mark. You're muted.
Nothing's perfect. I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our moderator and introduction of our panelists, Mr. Chuck Flax. Chuck?
Thank you. My name is Chuck Flax. I am a longtime resident of Santa Barbara. People might know my parents, who are longtime activists in this community, Dick and Mickey Flax. I'm an independent consultant working on community development issues, which I've actually been working on my whole life. I was involved in some redevelopment work in Chicano Park, where we built affordable housing adjacent to the park. And we'll hear more about the park later. I want to set a little context for this event, for those of you who are maybe tuning in and don't know all the things that are happening. Mark Alvarado is growing a new organization that will represent the heart and soul of the Latino community, both on the east side and the west side, with the hope that of a real voice. We wonderfully have our elected representatives, but sometimes the voice of the community is not completely heard. And this case of Ortega Park is an example of that situation, where the city thinks they talk to the community. They had several meetings. They believe, the city government believes, that the community has already weighed in on this park project. And in fact, there is a development plan. But as is often the case, the voices of the Latinx community in our region are not heard and have not been represented. And so this is an opportunity. Thankfully, Mark raised the flag in time for the Historic Land Use Committee to recognize the value of this project. And we're now going to hear from some of the people who have been involved in trying to preserve the murals, as well as some national experts. Let me introduce the whole panel, and then each person will have a full 10 minutes to talk about their interest in this project. First of all, we have Josie Talamantes. She's a historian from San Diego, California. She co-founded Chicano Park in 1970, which is an amazing story. And I honestly can say that the history of Chicano Park is really why I'm personally, my life has been committed to community development work and trying to lift up the voices of people who reside in disfavored communities. She's kind of a mother of this movement. She helped develop the park into a cultural national historic landmark containing the largest collection of artistic murals in the United States. Ms. Talamantes was also the chief of programs for the California Arts Council. She served as the director of the Centro Cultural de la Raza and was on the board of the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture. Then we're going to hear from Dr. Holly Barnett Sanchez. She's an emeritus professor and curator of Latin American and Chicana, Latina art history at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. After that will be Freddie Janca, a friend of mine, executive director of the Carolyn Glasso Bailey Foundation and a member of the Santa Barbara Arts Advisory Committee. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Visual and Critical Studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And then some representatives from the site and studio conservation team. These were the consultants that were hired by the city to evaluate the historical significance and the opportunity for preservation of the mural. Their work is critical. The people on the committee were Kiernan Graves, Evelyn Bird, Magdalena Solano, and Abigail Rodriguez. And they were the conservation experts that evaluated the Ortega Park mural evaluation report. Next, we have Dr. Tim Drescher. We're honored to have him. He's an independent scholar and co-chair of the Rescue Public Murals, as well as a former co-editor of Community Murals magazine in Berkeley, California. Dr. Drescher has been studying and documenting murals since 1972, and he's the author of San Francisco Bay Area Murals, Communities Create Their Muses, 1904 to 1997. He's also the co-author of Give Me Life, Iconography and Identity in East LA Murals with our own also Dr. Holly Barnett Sanchez. And finally, we will have Maestro Manuel Unzueta. He's an icon and longtime leader, artist, activist, and educator in the Santa Barbara and Tri-County region. His murals at Ortega Park and elsewhere have been seen locally, nationally, and internationally, and he's been an advocate for Chicano art and culture throughout his long career. I feel honored to be invited to moderate this panel. Unfortunately, we just don't have the time to incorporate all of your comments at this stage. Mark is going to be a conduit for all of us to be able to share our voices, and there will be time in the future to weigh in and for you to share your voice as part of this process. So let's get educated first, and we'll start with Josie Talamantes. Ms. Talamantes, thank you.
Hello, good morning. Can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry. I just want to say to begin with, this is a pretty difficult topic. You know, how can historic preservation impact Chicano art? And so I just need to let you know that I took a look at the process that you all are going through, and I dealt with it that way. Now, I'm not sure how to move my screen here, guys.
It looks like use your slide bar on the right-hand side of the slides there. There's like you're up in here. Or you can just move, there you go. See that little slide there? You can just move it up and down.
Josie, you can also use the down arrow on your keyboard. That'll advance the slide.
All right, let's do that. Nope, not working. Sorry, I'm gonna hold you guys up.
Oh, there you go. You want to just, I think it's a PDF. You want to just
Okay.
scroll down.
Hold on, that's probably the wrong thing. I'm sorry. Let me try it again. I'm sorry. We should have practiced more on Mark. Shoot. I don't see my.
Okay, you're not sharing your screen anymore? And I think you had it for just a split second.
Yeah, but I don't see it now. Sorry.
When you say share screen, there you go.
No, but that's not my screen. Okay.
Josie, do you have the document open on your desktop?
I thought I did. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Somebody else want to talk for a few minutes while I get this under control?
Sure. Why don't we come back to you, Josie? Let's
Okay.
turn it over
Thank
to
you.
Dr. Holly Barnett Sanchez, and we'll come back to Josie.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Sanchez?
Okay, here I am, and I neither wanted to proceed or follow Josie. Her work is so magnificent, but the images behind you of Chicano Park are very heartening. I want to thank Mark for organizing this and for lighting a fire under all of us to work to save the murals at Ortega Park, and for the introduction this morning. I am honored and pleased to be here, and I have to say, looking at the images of everyone who is here today, several of you could give a presentation on how the history of social and political movements inspired Chicano murals as well or better than I, or we could have a whole panel on just that. I have been asked to address this in 10 minutes, and so I'm going to be referring to my notes to help me remember what I'm doing. So what we're, in looking at the history of social and political movements for murals and mural clusters and including those at Ortega Park, we have to begin with the Chicano civil rights movement itself. And of course, many of you lived this movement from beginning to now, but for those of you, this is a primer for those of you who don't know the movement and a reminder of just some of the things involved in the civil rights movement. which the art movement came into being in order to support and advance and construct. And so here we go. This is a list. The farm workers' struggle throughout the US Southwest, Pacific Northwest, the Midwest. The Raza Unida Party in Texas, the Crusade for Justice in Denver, feminist activism, efforts towards political representation at all levels of government, better education, housing, insurance, employment opportunities, healthcare, anti-Vietnam War efforts, and the student and youth movements, including the high school blowouts, also called walkouts, in 1968, and the National Chicano Youth Conference in Denver that resulted in El Plan Espiritual de Aztlán, which is really important to consider when we think about murals and the subject matter of pre-Columbian imagery and its importance. Because from the very beginning, for a lot of Chicano Movimiento activists and performing literary and visual artists, the pre-Columbian world was critical, foundational, and we see it everywhere. So what I'd like to go back to or toward is starting with the UFW, El Teatro Campesino, El Malcriado, and the Del Rey murals. So Luis Valdez and his brother and sister started working with Cesar Chavez to get the farm workers out of the fields and to march, which Cesar Chavez called his art form, the march. So they created the actos on the back of flatbed trucks and used bullhorns to get people's attention. El Malcriado, the newspaper for the UFW, presented cartoons and reproduction of prints from the Taller de Gráfico Popular. Artists such as Carlos Almaraz and Barbara Carrasco and Magoo created billboard-sized panels for hanging in back of the meetings for the UFW. And arguably the first Chicano mural, the Del Rey mural, was at the Cultural Central, the Cultural Center for the Teatro Campesino. And they involved marches, 2 processions on either side of the entryway, one of distinguished pre-Columbian elite rulers, as in the Bonampak murals, and revolutionary, on the other side, revolutionary leaders from the Mexican Revolution, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X, none of whom were all in the same place at the same time. But that was the beginning. And from that beginning, in terms of murals, you have the iconography and tropes of a lot of later murals. I want to read you something from a young, she's young to me, artist and essayist based in LA, Sandra de la Loza. Chicano murals of the 1970s reflected a process of rupture as a new generation of artists created a space dramatically different from that experienced by their parents. A radical process of dissolution began. On one level, muralism literally destabilizes the concrete materialism of space with paint. But on another level, murals produced during this era should be seen as visual manifestations of a transforming consciousness, a radical dismantling of dominant cultural values, both Mexican and American, in which past myths, self-images, and beliefs melt down and transmute. So in an article I wrote, I called that the process of radical mestizaje, and Tim and I in our book call that Chicanismo. And George Lipsitz, to insert him in this conversation, talked about this in terms of both community-based art making and art-based community making. And both of these, well, all Chicano art does that. but especially the graphic arts and mural art making. So early expressions of Chicano art, literary, visual, and performing, really was the process of depicting themselves as neither Mexican nor American, but a hybrid. As mestizos, as radical mestizos, a political act of self-creation and self-naming. Many of the early Chicano artists, like Jose Montoya, for example, and Sal Torres Queso from San Diego, went to art schools and universities and were exposed to other eras and venues of art making. The expressionism of revolutionary German artists, posters of Russian artists from the revolution, political cartooning from all the many French revolutions. And these provided education in how art functions in political contexts. But art schools and universities were not in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and in some cases in the 80s and the 90s, teaching the arts of Mexico of any era. So there were coffee table books that showed pre-Columbian stuff and showed modern Mexican stuff. So Chicano artists, a lot of them went down to Mexico and saw for themselves. Worked at the Siqueiros Taller in Cuernavaca, as Judy Baca and Manuel Martinez did, or worked with the Taller de Gráfica Popular in Mexico City, and spent a lot of time at pre-Columbian sites. Okay, there are many differences between Mexican and Chicano murals, which are often compared. Usually Chicano murals come out unfavorably in that comparison, but they are phenomenologically different. What the Chicano artists did learn was to create one's own history as a path to create one's identity, to build one's present and possible futures on a very large scale that you can see in back of Josie right now. And that the ancient world is of inestimable value. So what Chicanos brought to the party that was different, they weren't officially sanctioned or sponsored, the murals, as part of a national effort of rebuilding a nation. They were never thought of as an elite art of official culture. They were primarily outdoors in local working class barrios, not government buildings. And the indigenous lives, not just cultures and their artifacts, have value in the present. That Chicano mestizaje, water, I'm in the desert here. That Chicano mestizaje moved toward the indigenous, not away from it, as it did in Mexico. That Chicanas and Chicanos sought to make community art rather than public art. They sought to create communities of muralists and murals, which Tim will address more specifically. The clusters we speak about in San Francisco, I want to say here in Santa Barbara, there in Santa Barbara, at Ortega Park in Los Angeles and San Diego. Other diverse sources, prints and posters.
I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay. What I would like to say is that this, that I end where I began. That our struggle to save Ortega Park murals and what they represent, the local East Side community and its value, and the larger community of mural clusters or mural communities and the larger communities of people they represent. Our struggle joins the other struggles we face right now. The Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, LGBTQ efforts towards full representation and acknowledgement, and the other existential challenges we're facing right now. They exhaust us, they energize us, and we keep going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Josie, are you ready to? Okay, great. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to go.
Great.
Let's try it again. Okay, let's see. Let's see, view. View screen. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So as I started to say, in 10 minutes to try to unpack Chicano heart and how it can be impacted by cultural preservation didn't work. So what I want to start off by saying is I did do an analysis, a brief, real quick analysis of the work that's being done by the community and led by Mark Alvarado. I read all the articles and I did a little historic research. And I was struck by two things in this process, and that is right here. The first statement, murals do not represent, murals do not represent an intact or unique or particular style that is important to the heritage of the city, nor forms an integral component of a thematic complex or district, and does not qualify as historic resource. And then counter to that, I found in the notes was paraphrasing, of course, master artist Manuel Unceta. This was a cultural lesson, but what about the spiritual aspect of the park? The most important park on the east side. What about the community around it? And I start with those because it said to me, something's not right here. Something's not being, there's no cohesive communication between the community and the assessors. They start off by saying there was extensive community input through the master plan listing 150 individuals at the workshop. However, at their November 2020 public virtual meeting, it was stated that it had been a long time since they had last spoken to the community, which said to me, because of COVID and things like that, everything was going virtual. Many in Latino community do not use virtual platforms for communication. Across the street from the park is a senior complex. Were they able to participate? Are my questions. COVID has exposed the fact that Black and Brown communities do not have the same access to technology as more affluent communities. The plan was to make an underutilized dysfunctional park a true community park. This was said at the meeting in November. I did not get a sense from Mr. Unzueta's comments, questions that the surrounding community was consulted, nor does it seem that the community has the same view as described above. Yet the Santa Barbara Historical Landmark Commission states protecting and promoting Santa Barbara's valuable historic resources boosts civic pride, economic prosperity, and gives residents as well as visitors a visual reminder of our shared heritage. Another couple of observations that I was looking at through the process. In the 1920s, an Upper East Side was primarily wealthy elite. The lower Southern East Side minorities were gravitating, nourishing their cultural heritage apart from each other, which said to me that there were separate enclaves, but yet we were all in that community in the South Side, East Side, or Southern East Side of Santa Barbara. Mexican lemon laborers for Johnson Fruit Company packing plant built homes for their families. Ortega Park, built in 1930 over a landfill. 1960 saw the elimination of green space by the destruction of Laguna Park Grandstand to build city corporation warehouses. It appears that though the neighborhoods change, the area surrounding Ortega Park are reflective of Latinx community. And correct me if I'm wrong, everybody. So how can historic preservation help protect and preserve Chicano art? The National Register, there's basically 4 criteria. And I'm just gonna throw them out there. You can read them, but I'm gonna go step by step because I think it's something you need to think about. The first one, the property is associated with events that made a significant contribution to a broad patterns of American history. And I'm adding in here, cultural centers and murals created during the Chicano civil rights era emerged out of a need to teach and validate Chicanx, Latinx, indigenous arts and cultural heritage. In Santa Barbara, of course, Casa de la Raza just recognized, and your historical landmark just recognized Casa de la Raza as a cultural resource, noting the cultural significance of the murals created by Manuel Anzueta. There were others, of course, that you can piece together throughout the state of California: Centro Cultural de la Raza, Plaza in San Diego, Plaza de la Raza, Self-Help Graphics, Spark, Mission Cultural Center in San Francisco, Mission Graphics, RCF Centro. And yeah, I could go on and on. Guadalupe Cultural Center in Texas. I mean, there's more and more. And I think Holly was alluding to the connection of cultural centers, in particular murals throughout the Southwest. The third is property in the property embodies, I can't read the top part there. Whoops, sorry. In that, a method of construction of high artistic value or represents a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. So according to the American Latinos and the Making of the United States, a theme study that is a national publication to really look at Latinos' contributions and then apply it to a process to become listed on the National Register. Murals are, and out of that, murals are one of the most powerful, enduring legacies of Latino cultural reclamation projects. This movement, Monument to Public Art Forum, links aesthetics to advocacy and education. Although murals were painted on walls of Puerto Rican and Cuban communities, they appeared most extensively in the Southwest as part of the Chicano movement. Muralism engaged a national network of regionally based artists. And that needs to be kept in mind, because when you're messing with murals, you're messing with murals throughout the Southwest. A multitude of other recognized collectives developed community-centered public art. Social issues were illuminated through a localized sensibility that incorporated design elements, color, visual iconography from local, regional, artistic traditions. And I think Holly just said it correctly in terms of describing the murals. And I'm going to kind of go through this. A major aim was to infuse cultural icons and symbols with new social meaning, epic in scope and rhetorical in context. Chicano murals were especially potent forces creating historical consciousness. Their dynamic visual narratives linking past and present struggles for self-determination help viewers remember the past and imbue the future. These are some of the artists that are listed in Ortega Park. I'm sure there were more. I was just captured what I could find. More than anything, murals belong to a significant collection of public art Chicano murals from throughout California and the Southwest. Ortega Park Master Plan did not conduct a CEQA assessment of the murals for conservation purposes. California Preservation Act protects artists over their creations. The work belongs to the artist. For example, Michael Schnorr, the late Michael Schnorr, produced a 1 foot square of his mural when we were attacked in 1997. He pulled that mural off and he rolled it up and took it into court and showed everybody that was his mural. Just because it was painted on the wall was belonged to the state of California, the mural belonged to him. The presentation today should provide enough information to articulate the historic significance of murals in Ortega Park. Holly just gave you an excellent condensed version of the value of murals. I just listed a couple of the murals here just to, I only picked the ones from painted in 1979. When you look at the criteria, even though we're talking 42 years and the criteria marks off at 50 years, the bottom line is you can make an educated discussion as to why 42 years is significant for cultural art history murals. I wanted to just kind of move it through and stop the share so that I could tell you, it's very important that you connect these murals across California, across the Southwest, when the articulation goes forward to listing as a national or even a California registration. You've got designation, at least with CASA, that is validating your master artist, Mr. Ranzueta, but there, Armando Rascon, some of the other artists listed there have national reputations, even international, showing records in their resume. So your articulation in terms of the value of the arts and the content of what they're doing is important. What is not discussed really is, because in this short amount of time, I couldn't go back further. What's the origins of the name of Ortega Park? I mean, was that a land grant? Did we look at what was the evolution of that name? And then what was before that? What did the Chumash people do in this area that then led to this park? The most I could get was, once the freeway was going through, it separated the east side from kind of the side that was closer to the ocean. And I can tell you, and I'm sure Chuck Flax will articulate, you know, planning has always been immersed in systematic racism against our communities. When you look at Chicano Park, and I didn't really want to focus on showing you all the murals of Chicano Park, you can pull them up anywhere. I thought it was more important with the lineup today of the presenters was to take that context and put it together in an articulation to the value of these murals was more important than me showing you Chicano Park. You can pull Chicano Park, you can look up the National Register nomination, you can pull it down, you can copy it. I'd be happy to look over whatever you put forward, but I think you have a strong case of presenting preserving these murals, and you can use the system to preserve them. And I will say, I was pretty shocked. I did go back and I listened to the forum in November. I read all the articles that were written, and I was pretty shocked at the mismanagement of the process. To miss the CEQA evaluation that specifically asks you to look at cultural resources was a big error. And on top of that, anytime they're using any type of federal dollars, if the site is recognized as a national a cultural resource, then they have to use another process before they can even spend that money. So I think it's important that you understand that that process is called the 106 regulations. And that means nothing to us right here, right now. But what it does do is it stops any federal money from coming into a site and destroying that site for gentrification purposes or somebody's gain of profit by turning the community's resource into everybody's community. I found one statement that threw me for a loop, and it was now that the park will be a better resource or a community resource for everybody involved. And that really bothered me, because I thought to myself, if they haven't talked to the community, how do they know that the seniors aren't going over there and sitting in the park? How do they know that the community is not using the baseball and the soccer turfs to do their thing? They don't know, and they don't care. And they're looking at it as a profit-making entity. Apparently, there's only 2 pools in Santa Barbara County that is open to the public. So this will be another pool bringing in people from outside rather than serving as the park to serve the community that surrounds it. And I know I'm probably close, Chuck, so I'm gonna bring it right back down. And thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Thank you so much, Josie. And we look forward to working with you. My goodness. There's so much history that you're part of, and I feel honored that you are participating in our work here. Thank you. Next, we have a local expert in art and Latino culture, Freddie Janca.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start with a big thank you to Mark for really doing so much of the heavy lifting to get this event together, as well as to keep a group of community members continually informed of almost daily actions the city seems to manage to put together against this project. So, you know, as Mark said at the beginning of the meeting, even though, you know, we're fresh off an HLC meeting where they were unable to really make any sort of decision, Parks and Rec is already pushing for grant application funding, which is really shocking that you know, having everything been put on pause in November, that we were still kind of moving forward with something that has serious problems. My background, I grew up in Santa Barbara, born and raised, went to junior high at Santa Barbara Junior High. I'm Latinx, and you know, growing up in Santa Barbara, it was challenging to say the least to, you know, understand what sort of my identity and background and the rich cultural heritage that that, you know, ancestors before me have shared with me. I want to thank Josie and Dr. Barnett Sanchez before me for such fantastic snippets into the history and context for where we're at. I just want to throw out too that, you know, not only the larger network within California that this mural group is a part of, but there are murals that exist all over our town and our community that are also part of this network. So, you know, Mr. Unzueta also led a fantastic mural project at Santa Barbara City College, which I would think is also part of this larger network. And, you know, many of you know them throughout the city. I'm currently a member of the City Arts Advisory Committee, and one of two Santa Barbara born members currently. I feel like that has been something that's also very eye-opening, is when one looks at the city councils, commissions, and committees, there are often very few Santa Barbara born and raised and people of color as well. And I think that it's, you know, important that we continue to encourage that growth within our community. So as a member of Arts Advisory Committee, I'd like to share with you all that city staff has obstructed our meeting. So, you know, although City Council has had on the books a you know, a Arts Advisory Committee since the 80s. I believe the most recent motion was from 1985. You know, part of that responsibility is to be an advisory group of experts for the city when coming to decisions or questions around art. You know, I think it's interesting that there are a lot of these systems that are built into the city charter and that have been voted on by city council and approved, and yet they are not encouraged to be followed. There are no formal ways to follow these you know, suggestions for some of these advisory groups. Part of the purview of Arts Advisory has also been, since its inception, to have a standing subcommittee for the visual arts in public places. This committee was dissolved by city staff in 2016 under the guise of it being in violation of the Brown Act. This has been, you know, an unfortunate decision by city staff to dissolve this committee. And I see a direct correlation with the situation we are in right now. This crisis in our community has a direct correlation to the fact that this Visual Arts and Public Places Committee was dissolved. Part of that purview is also to address deaccessioning. Should there is a formal process for deaccessioning public art in our community. It is on the books. I get frustrated sometimes because I feel like, you know, we're, it's all new, right? Like we've never had to address these things before. And the reality is sometimes pieces do need to be deaccessioned, or people want to deaccession them. And there's processes for this to sort of just assume that you can destroy things and move on and no one's going to notice is just an example of white supremacy in our city government. And the fact that the plan, I would encourage everyone to also look at some of these renders for this park design. This park design is essentially taking an open piece of land with many centrally located murals around spaces of community activity and sports. And essentially, I think it's 88% that are proposed to be destroyed, 2 to be removed, to be relocated. And I believe it's another 5 or 6 that they proposed destroying, taking photographs of, and then reproducing. So what you then have in these renders is you have what's been a beautiful open space, easily accessible to the passerby, has become almost a walled prison. You will see all of the murals have been turned around to face outside the park. So essentially that tells the community that you're no longer welcome, but these things you find important, well, you can walk by and see them. You don't need to actually come into the park now. So, you know, access is restricted. The art and cultural artifacts are turned outwards. So this no longer becomes a part of the community. The Parks and Recreation Department really needs to go back to the drawing board and rethink how they even engaged with the community. I think they are backpedaling and on the defensive, and love to show that they've done all these surveys and connected and had all these community gatherings. But what I, again, following up on Josie's remarks, is what questions were asked? How were they asked? What language were they asked in? How much time did they give people to respond to these questions? I mean, I think there's so many ways of soliciting community insight, contributions, et cetera, that are engaging, welcoming, and equitable. And I question the equitable nature of this survey and how these research was gathered in the first place. I also think that Parks and Rec really needs to, bring some more voices to the planning process, and actually rethink these processes that they've based all of their decision making on. And I have to say, this also shows a great waste of city resources. The fact that we've gotten this far, that there's so much effort has been made into this, and so much money has been paid and invested and put into this, to only come up with something that does a disservice to our community, not only the local community around the park, but also our greater Santa Barbara city. And as you can see from our experts, this is part of a network. Like the missions are celebrated as being a network, this is a network of Chicano culture that really celebrates Indigenous knowledge and the connection to the Indigenous. And again, this effort by Parks and Recreation and the city to support this is essentially a case of whitewashing our community once again. I mean, I think those who love the white walls, Spanish style, colonial revival architecture of our community really you are also celebrating a whitewashing of the community. And it's, I feel like my role as a voting, tax-paying citizen, unpaid volunteer on the City Arts Advisory Committee to continue to champion public art in our community. One of the reasons that our Arts Advisory Committee has been causing so much trouble is because we want to talk about public art in our community. This, I think, is a great example of the need. People need public art. Public art is meaningful. And, I love also this concept of, the murals being part of community art. And I think there are multiple communities within our larger community, and each should be, supported in developing and executing, community and public art and I see this as a great role for the Arts Advisory Committee. If you actually look at the history of how these murals in question were originally developed, they had barely any funding. Manuel is sourcing, used paint from the dump, essentially, volunteering his time, absolutely, little to no compensation for master artists who are sharing their expertise. They do it because they love it. And so many people in the arts community do it because we love it, not because of what we're getting paid for it. So if we actually took even some of the resources that are being identified for this project to actually authentically engage and support our communities, especially our marginalized communities, to help support making their own art or co-creating, I think is really a critical role that that Arts Advisory could play, especially as it has been determined for decades that this is an important role, a needed role in our community. So, you know, my closing note is just, you know, we will continue to advocate for art in our community and the importance of art in our community, even if we're obstructed by city staff from actually meeting and having, you know, important conversations about celebrating arts and culture in our community. So again, thank you to the speakers before me and the speakers after me. Thanks again to Mark and Chuck for moderating. I'm grateful to be a part of today's presentation and the continued fight to ensure an equitable presence in the future for these murals and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freddie. Your voice is critical in preserving art, in advancing art, and spurring on unheard voices in our community. Thank you so much. I want to reintroduce the team that produced a very elaborate report, and somebody needs to help me by defining the word deaccessioning, and maybe they can do that. This is the, hang on a sec here. This is the design team of site and studio conservation, the site and studio conservation team, Kiernan Graves, Evelyn Bird, Magdalena Solano, and Abigail Rodriguez. Thank you so much for coming, and you can tell us some more about your report.
Yeah, thank you so much to Chuck for introducing us. I just wanted to mention that unfortunately Abigail Rodriguez can't be with us today. She had a medical emergency, which is very unfortunate because we drew quite a bit from her work, which is part of an 8-month-long study looking at the history of Chicano murals in California. But we will do our best to go on without her. Again, so we are 4 conservators. This was very much a team effort, and we all brought different viewpoints and expertise to the report, and the recommendations were determined by consensus. You know, we give our heartfelt thanks, honestly, to all of these panelists for including us to present our thoughts here. I think, you know, a lot of what was presented at the HLC meeting was a very short summary of and somewhat misrepresented of our report. And we also wanted to give a big thank you to all the residents of the East Side, sorry, and the Chumash Nation. So I'll be giving a talk here about our report. All of Evelyn and Magdalena, who are also on, feel free to jump in at any time. We just have such a short time to go through such a huge amount of work. So as you all know, this evaluation was performed at the request of the City of Santa Barbara at the Parks Department. The evaluation process was extremely short, limited to 2 weeks. And then the report writing was also limited to 1 week with a few days for minor revisions. We did not know the timeline of the city going forward after the report was submitted. And here I'm going to just give what is a context of our report and basically a rationale of our decision-making process. If you are interested in the report, it is available publicly, and I and the rest of the team are open to any questions or concerns that any of the community members have here or going forward. I think a theme that we tried to put in our report throughout was that this is a community park, should be defined by the community, and community input is really important to the final decisions. We just made recommendations based on our research, who we spoke with, but ultimately, you know, this is a community park used by the East Side residents, and you know, community input is really important. So we're very open to any comments and questions. As Mark mentioned, we only understood recently that the reasoning behind the short time frame was that the city was trying to obtain a one-time offered multi-million-dollar grant through a funding opportunity related to COVID issues. The objective of our evaluation was to provide guidance and context for community conversations and municipal decision-making processes with regard to the future of Ortega Park murals, given that the structures on which they are painted were all slated for demolition due to the large-scale renovation of the park. Given the city's assessment of the murals prior to our involvement, the quote that Josie mentioned in her first slide, we wanted to provide them with education on the importance of the murals, as well as the community mural making tradition. Since the city had emphasized to us a number of times that there was extensive community involvement in park renovation plans, we were told this project had the most community outreach of any project in recent history. We did understand that only one community member had mentioned the murals, and it was our understanding at the time that that was in the context of painting more future murals. We also understood that in the Planning Commission review, there were no objections to the master plan. So we thought it was extremely, again, important to emphasize the community involvement at every stage of the assessment. Because everything that we recommended would significantly impact the renovation plans, both visually in terms of the park and financially, which I think is a really important point. We also had to take into account the high levels of hazardous materials present in the soil and the groundwater, and think about those safety issues for the community, which seemed like a very large and important part of the renovation plans from our perspective. So quickly, I'm going to discuss the murals as 4 distinct groups. The first one is the park entrance. It's decorative symbols in front of the Welcome House. These were not part of our remit by the city, but we felt it was important to document them regardless, because we determined they were painted by Armando Vallejo, likely in the mid-80s. The second grouping is what was once the stage, now low retaining walls. There are 7 murals there. We were told by the Santa Barbara Arts Administration and the artists that we interviewed that these walls were always considered to be temporary and used specifically for art education and training. So even though the artists themselves and the Santa Barbara Arts Alliance mentioned they were more interested in creating new murals in the park instead of saving these, we still individually called out the Coatlicue figure in the report as worthy of being saved due to its technical ability. And it seemed very obvious to us, even just our 2 weeks in the park, how much the community valued this specific mural. There were constantly selfies being taken in front of it. There were offerings being made. So even though the last restoration of this mural was done in 2016 and it was intended as temporary, we still called this out specifically in our recommendations to be saved via relocation. The third grouping are the farm worker and community inspired murals located on the exterior walls of the restroom building. There are 3 murals painted or overseen by Armando Vallejo and Manuel Unzueta, both of whom are extremely important figures in the Chicano movement and La Casa de la Raza, elevating these murals in terms of their importance historically. Lastly, the pool area, there are let's see, I didn't write that down exactly. I think 7 murals in that grouping. And they were painted over the course of many years. 3 of them being painted in 1979. 4 of them being painted in 1979. All of them being heavily restored over the years by artists of the Santa Barbara Arts Alliance. And in each of those murals are in varying conditions. So the report makes the recommendation that 2 sets of the extant murals in the pool area and the restroom area be considered as structures of merit by the City of Santa Barbara Historic Landmarks Committee. The murals on the restroom building and the murals in the pool area, with the exception of the dolphin mural and the blue whale mural, which were painted both in 2005. And again, let's see. So we went on to rank the murals based on what we saw as their significance within the community, their significance within the history of murals and the Chicano movement, as well as their historical integrity. We considered artist input. We also tried to advocate for the working artists here in Santa Barbara, in terms of our recommendations for recreation by the artists. We tried to advocate in our worksheets of costing and budgets, enabling to be paid fairly for their work and enabling them to use better materials, which then enables the longevity of future murals, because we noticed that because of the inexpensive materials that had to be used, Carlos Cuellar, for example, as someone mentioned, had to get his materials from the dump because of lack of resources, as well as his environmental consciousness. All of these materials are degrading significantly, fading, and will continue to degrade over time. So that was something that we also considered in our recommendations. We did look at precedents within California for treatments of similar murals and what has been achieved in terms of landmarking status. We looked at Chicano Park, of course, in San Diego, as well as the recent designation of 6 murals, 6 Chicano murals in San Jose. The team is familiar with approaches of other cities, mural programs in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Chicago. In terms of context, we tried to balance the mural making tradition within the history of community and the desires of the stakeholders. This included the city's report on community involvement, the history of the mural making in the park being very organic. Over the course of the last 40 years, approximately 50 murals, possibly more, have been painted in Ortega Park. We were also very aware that 4 large murals were destroyed as recently as 2019, and the community approach was to document the murals with photographs and honor them with a ceremony. We prioritized the La Casa de la Raza involvement and the Chumash Chicano themes, which are so unusual in modern murals. However, it must be noted here that upon speaking to Chumash tribe members, it did seem as though Aztec Chumash solstice was not as intimately connected with the Chumash tradition as the name suggests. Still, it has importance, but even one tribe member went on to suggest that the mural be renamed. And although the tribe members that we spoke to were very honored to be acknowledged by these murals, they mentioned that there were no Chumash tribe members involved in the painting of these murals. And so that was something else that we wanted to take into consideration and considered them equal stakeholders to this park. So in terms of the treatment of the murals, we recommended that 2, the Campesinos, which was probably the most significant of all the murals, be preserved in place, as well as Cosmic Unity. Both of those were originally painted in 1979, and even though Campesinos was destroyed and then repainted again and then repainted again, sort of re-envisioned each time to some degree, we still felt like it retained its original significance and the power of meaning. It was mentioned, called out by almost every single person that we spoke with as, extremely meaningful to them as well. And obviously its association with the Casa de la Raza work and the campesinos in the community and their struggles. The other one is Cosmic Unity. We did feel like in terms of the Chumash Chicano connection, that was the one that represented that the best. And so recommended that there. It should be said that we did initially include more murals in that significance rating category, but when we got feedback from the city staff, and the staff members told us that the Historic Landmarks Commission would not consider anything of 2008 or newer as significant enough to be considered as a structure of merit. So to be honest, we were very pleasantly surprised with the viewpoints of the landmark commissioners at the meeting. I thought a lot of them had excellent points.
Kiernan, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up.
Sure. Okay. So just really quickly, I want to make clear 2 things. First, that the 4 murals that we recommended to be repainted by the original artist or someone from Santa Barbara Arts Alliance. These are Ninos de Maíz, the Aztec Chumash Soltis, Underwater Atlantis Toltecas, and La Playa. We then recommended that two be documented and deaccessioned. And I just, to your point, deaccessioning is a common term in the museum and collection world for intentionally removing works of art and either selling or destroying them. We knew that there was a deaccessioning process in the city books, as was mentioned. And so again, that process brings in community input. So the Deportes and Codes Cosby, while we felt those were fantastic, we felt their themes did not have the same historic and community weight, especially in terms of social justice. And this sentiment was echoed. The mural concept plan, that we didn't have anything to do with that. We made personal critiques of the aspects of their approach, very similar to Mr. Junka's comments, but ultimately we felt the design had to be vetted by the community and park goers. Our recommendations went on to mention that the one thing every person that could agree on was the importance of the mural making and art education component of the park's tradition. So we highly emphasized that, and we recommended that other murals from Puerto Vallarta and the Chumash community be included in future projects, and to prioritize community-based murals instead of content that's purely decorative.
Thank you very much.
I'll end it there. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry.
And it's a long report. It's very thorough, and I encourage people to read it. It's very well written. It's really an important piece of work to support the arguments for preservation and advancing the themes that people are talking about here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next we have Dr. Tim Drescher, who's an independent scholar and co-chair of Rescue Public Murals. He was also a co-author of a book about murals with Dr. Holly Barnett Sanchez. Dr. Drescher, on to you. Can we help Dr. Drescher get unmuted?
I've asked him to unmute himself.
There he goes. Good.
Okay. All right, am I on now?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Mark, and everybody else for putting in the effort to make this gathering this morning happen. I think that I see a real division, not within this group so much, but clearly between the community and the official Santa Barbara. So what I want to talk about a little bit, which may help by way of clarification, is the experience with Rescue Public Murals. The other co-chair, by the way, is Will Shank, who was the previous head of the conservators at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And one of the problems that Rescue Public Murals ran up against was that the conservators' code of ethics sometimes disagreed with what the community might have wanted. Conservators' expertise regarding materials is really wonderful and should be taken advantage of it at any opportunity. But the problem is that the heart of community murals is something else, not quantifiable, not a matter of chemistry and walls. The most at the heart of the community murals RPM sees is the process involved in the painting of the mural. And we should remember that part of any mural project, the process is by far the most radical part of it, because it offers the opportunity to experience genuine democracy, which is pretty rare in our lives these days. Sometimes, as may have happened in this project, people are excluded. From some of the descriptions, it would seem like white supremacy has dominated the thinking of people who want to turn the murals outward, not inward, for example. That's a major, major change, as was noted. But even if civic proposals are well-intentioned, they have to, as other speakers today have mentioned, they have to include the community. And another way to think about that is that community murals are different from public art. Sometimes the terms get used interchangeably, but I think it's useful to realize community murals are done by or with a group of people. Public art is done for people who, if you ask them about it, feel like it's done to them or on them or at them. But community arts are done participatorily with groups of people. And I think that the one document that I've been able to read, which is the City of Santa Barbara's memorandum, really goes in a very different direction. Its language is stifling, its language is a bureaucratese, its language is designed to exclude the people most immediately affected by the murals. The language is basically saying, okay, you've done your part, we'll take it from here. And I think this meeting this morning and the references to other positions is that the community is saying, no, that's not true. That the murals are not merely paint on walls, but they're part of an ongoing process. And the perhaps clearest way to think about that is that the murals are actually a living part of the community. They're in constant interactions with each other and constant interactions with the members in the community. So it's very possible that in the process of restoring the murals, that changes may be made. And people have mentioned in passing that there was some understanding that there would be future murals painted, or that maybe some of the murals that are there now would be changed or replaced by a new mural. This is a major process and requires a lot of work with the people who live with it and with people who know the various communities of which the murals are a part. Certainly in this case, Native and Chicano murals in general, but also the whole history of community murals throughout the entire United States. An example of this is a mural painted by David Boteo at Estrada Courts in the 1970s. It's called Dreams of Flight. And the central image in this mural is a kid swinging on a tire hanging from a tree limb. Well, that's well and good. When Boteo went back and repainted this mural in the 1990s, so it was 20 some odd years old at this point, he made two changes. One is that he took the baseball cap that the kid on the tire was wearing and turned it backwards. Of course, an obvious thing to do in the 90s compared with the 70s. And the other thing he did was that he gave the kid an earring, thereby saying that girls can dream of flight just as well as boys can. Well, you may think that's a big deal or not a big deal, but I've told this story to maybe a dozen or more conservators, and some of them nod and say, yes, okay. And some of them throw their hands up and turn and run, saying that's absolutely inappropriate, that you're not supposed to make any changes at all. And yet, they're talking about destroying murals or reproducing them on aluminum or on vinyl fabric electrostatically. Both those things make huge changes in what the murals are and how they're perceived. So I guess what I want to do is simply encourage all of you, which seems to be going on already, is to think of the murals as alive. Think of them as parts of a dynamic interaction with their communities. Ortega Park is a relatively small cluster, but it has its history. And there are undoubtedly those who cherish its articulation of their culture and of their history and of their surroundings. and of the park's murals contribution to the quality of the lives of the people who play in the park, and maybe especially the children, because the park will be around and they will be the people fighting these struggles in future years. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drescher. Thank you for your expertise and your leadership in this field. We're thrilled to have you as part of this discussion, and hopefully we can continue it in the future. And finally, our last panelist is one of the artists of note himself, Mr. Maestro Manuel Unzueta. Please share with us your perspective on this. Thank you.
You're unmuted, Manuel. Just that, how's that?
Okay.
There we go.
Gracias.
Okay. Everybody, this is Manuel Unzueta calling from De la Guerra Street in Santa Barbara. I want to thank all the people that have spoken before. And I want to let you know that I thank you very much. I am very much aware that the last name Unzueta, from Thousand Oaks to Paso Robles, anyone dealing with Mexican American Chicano, they gotta go through my studio. Okay. Unfortunately, I lost my studio to a fire in 2013 and it's gone. But I want to let you know that I thank everybody that is talking about murals today. I got my Master's of Fine Arts in 1975 at UC Santa Barbara because I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't realize what a research university was, but I learned about how to research. They asked me to give papers about the Egyptians and the Romans and everything. And eventually, I decided to get my Master's of Fine Arts in Mexican and Chicano art. However, I had a Master's of Fine Arts, but I realized that when I graduated, different from my American friends, if I may, I did not have any access to galleries and a means to make a living as an artist. I realized that. I kept on painting, I kept on doing my thing. I had done some murals in Santa Barbara, and I had done murals around parts of California. So what I'm trying to tell you, I am a good example of what it is to be a student, a painter, a master, or anything, to be excluded from the American experience. I realized that many Chicano artists and young Latino, Mexican American artists, they realize that it's going to be very hard for a city like Santa Barbara to say, I am going to sponsor you so that you can follow your visions of being an artist. Even though Santa Barbara says, we are an artistic city, we have galleries, we have museums, but still young Mexican American artists like myself, Chicano artists, we have to do other things in order to survive. Needless to say, by the 1970s, early 80s, I had to do other things in order to survive. And thanks to the Chicano movement, we had alternative galleries in San Diego, in LA, Sacramento, San Antonio, El Paso, Texas, where we could have at least a show, even though it was not necessarily a way to make a living, to pay our rent, our mortgage, or anything. But once we realized that, a lot of Chicano artists, we learned to have different talents. I got involved in music that I've been doing since I was 13. I was doing presentations in schools and everything. But once I went into my studio, that was my sacred cow. Okay, my sacred cow was my studio. Then they called me, Manuel, we have a project here and there. But never, of all the murals that I have done since 1971, none of those murals were paid a fair price. Compare what the cities were paying other people that they call themselves consultants, or a guy that came from New York, or a guy that came from Miami. So we realized that we had to make sure that we can survive. I developed a tremendous sense of survival to feed my family, to be able to move on. I started teaching at Santa Barbara City College at UC Santa Barbara. Then I went to teach in El Paso, Texas, where I grew up. Then I went to do other things. But the answer was to paint murals, not just for myself. I had no choice. I had to paint murals with people around me. So when I decided to be a community, a multi-oriented artist over 50 murals, I realized that the only way that I can be relevant, it was that I had to put my intellectual ideas to one side, my social ideas to one side, so that I can teach a few kids in Oxnard, California, how to paint a mural, how to work with gangsters, kids that were in gangs in Ortega Park, in order to paint something. I realized that if I went to El Paso, Texas, I had to paint something and give to that city something that they can have, that someone from their barrio did something. I'm not going to deny the fact that my master's degree has helped me, because that's the only way that I could defend myself. Oh, you got a master's of fine arts. Okay, you can come in. Oh, but then I realized that a lot of young Latino, Chicano, Mexican American artists, they don't have that. So what I decided was to be a mentor for different young artists way back in the 70s, to make sure that they understood that if you want to be an artist, you got to have a lot of guts. And I admire those kids that said, I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. And as I kept on checking on the dictionary of young artists that were coming into the fold between 1977, 1990, that all the young artists that were coming around, only about 5% were kids of Mexican American descent. So that means that other artists from other heritage, they were getting most of the money. So when we suggested a mural in Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Goleta, Oxnard, okay, man, here is cents and pennies. Do you want to do it? So we had no choice. We had to use our own paint. That's why these murals are falling apart. Why is it that the cities in these communities, they were not willing to say, if we paid $500,000 to pull palm trees in this city, and we'd spend, like in Santa Barbara, to do Children's Park, about $2 million, it would be okay. So some of you might say, well, Manuel, that's the way it is. You have to know how to publicize yourself. You need to know how to use the market. No matter what I did. And then the internet comes along. No matter what I did, nothing came in. Therefore, we became community, if you don't mind, community celebrities, because we were going into the streets to do a mural or two because they were going to pay us $100 or $200 or $300. When in the city, in the museums, some artists were getting paid, I understand, about $50,000 for a project, and people that spoke about different things about art. My friends, I thank you for what you're doing. I really, really thank you for what you are doing. Behind me is the painting that I did for my Masters of Fine Arts in 1975, which was the first Chicano painting for the University of California as a research university to accept a Chicano exhibition. I'm glad this painting did not burn in 2013, even though I lost about 300 pieces and about 2,000 drawings and collectibles and everything. So what I want to say is this: Ortega Park, where I used to play, and because I went to Santa Barbara Junior High, and more symbolic to me, when someone mentioned in here, Holly and Josie, they mentioned the spiritual side. I used to take my mother with Alzheimer's walking around Ortega Park. And my mother, she says, "Oh man, you look at that person." And my mother would say, her last name is Ortega. "Oh, this person, his last name is an Italian last name." And she would remember things as we walk around State Street. Then I walk 3 blocks way back to my mother's house. Therefore, as an artist, as a man that had to take a lot of classes about research, such as what is the difference between Mexican and Chicano art with Egyptian art? Fine. How come you don't want to paint like Picasso, like Jackson Pollock? How come you don't want to paint like Andy Warhol? I say, you know what? I know about these guys, but I want to paint about myself. I want to paint about my heritage. I want you to give me a chance. So when I got my MFA, I think I had a victory, that I was able to convince the persons that were sponsoring me to get a master's degree. Therefore, Ortega Park, my Chicano murals that I did at Casa de la Raza, remember, I painted the murals at La Casa de la Raza starting in 1971 with watercolors. We had no money for colors. But then through the years went by, I had to go and retouch them. And then in the last 10 years, we put a specific coating so that they can survive. And now, as you know, they are part of the heritage of Santa Barbara. I am upheld by that because I never wanted to be the person to be highlighted by this, because I'm dealing with a lot of young artists, you know, that they want to be artists, but there's no opportunities for them. The artists that I'm dealing with, young artists that painted in Ortega Park and other areas, still is the same. Many people from Santa Barbara, Montecito, Hope Ranch, they say, no, I gotta buy a painting, so I have to go to Hollywood. Oh, you know, I'm gonna buy a painting, but I'm gonna go to San Francisco. Did you know that I just bought some paintings in New York? And I say, wait a minute, why can't you sponsor some of these amazing kids in Santa Barbara? That they got a lot of talent, just as much as any of these other artists. If Santa Barbara is an artistic city, thanks to the knowledge of many people that turned this city into a great city of architecture, a great city with great greens everywhere. I love the city, okay? I cannot deny that. I love the city because I grew up here. When I came from El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico in 1965. You give me some green, you got to see my garden, okay? I got about 1,000 plants in there. Then music. You know, I've been involved with music since I was 12 years old. I discovered the Beatles in Juarez, Mexico in 1964. When I turned 15, the Beatles played in the Ed Sullivan Show. After that, I had long hair. Then I discovered Cesar Chavez when I was in high school and Martin Luther King. Again.
So, Mr. Unsueta, we'd like you to close, please. Thank you.
Okay. So what I am saying, how much do we need to say that these murals are historical? even if it's a small park in the city, surrounded by Latino Mexican names, to make it a showcase for the art of the community of the East Side. You can do other murals in other parts of the city for different ethnic groups, but please give us Ortega Park to ourselves to see what is that we want in that park. The spiritual side, the culture, the social part. Ortega Park will never die. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Unzueta. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your voice, your work, your art.
Thank you.
You're a legend for us, and we
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yes.
Very much.
I want to thank all of the panelists for your contributions. I think that this is the beginning of a conversation and a process and potentially a movement. And I'm going to let Mark Alvarado close our session here now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chuck. Once again, I'm just overwhelmed by the response by the attendees. So thank you for attending. Our speakers, as well as our panelists, Josie, Holly, Freddie Kiernan and her team, Magdalena, Abigail, and the other young lady, her name is escaped, Evelyn Bird, excuse me, I'm sorry, Evelyn, as well as Dr. Tim Drescher and my mentor and friend, Manuel Unzueta, who is the person is responsible for sending me to El Paso, Texas, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. And he said, go down there and figure it out. And come back home.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was prophetic with all of that. And with that, I met my beautiful wife and my wonderful daughter, and I'm just I'm thankful for that. So where are we right now? Well, I'll tell you what. As I stated in the opening, we have an agenda item on Tuesday where the city's going to be going after a grant. We're going to have to speak to that because you very well know if they are awarded the grant, the city's going to be held to what they're applying for without even recognizing what was said at last Wednesday's Historic Landmark Commission meeting. So I'll be sending out some correspondence regarding that. What I'd like to do right now is I'm going to leave the Zoom room open. If you have to leave, go ahead and leave. But if you want to stay in, I'm going to leave it open and we'll unmute anybody. If you have any questions for me, you know, I do have a little dialogue box where you will show my email and our website, the One Community Bridge Project. But I do want to thank the Association of Raza Educators, the Santa Barbara chapter, for co-hosting this event, and for everybody for attending. So like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and leave the room open. I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Carnal.
Everyone.
Thank you, Carnal.
You're welcome.
Gracias.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adios. Adios.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Que viva Ortega Park.
Que viva.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Gracias, all presenters. And Mark, you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Mark,
Gracias y pase buen día.
Thank you. I'm open here for
Gracias,
questions. If
señor
anybody has
Lucena.
anything. Anna, if you could unmute
a
everybody if they want to.
I have something to say, Mark.
Go ahead,
This is Josephine Bacamontes. There were a couple of things, I just wrote a note down. I just want to re-emphasize that the mural art belongs to the artist. They cannot destroy that, they can destroy whatever they want, but if they're destroying the mural, that artist has a lawsuit against them. Right now, we're looking at Kent Twitchell, a muralist in LA, just secured a substantial amount of money for the destruction of his murals. And Queso, who was Salvador Torres here in San Diego, is in the litigation with San Diego Unified School District for the elimination of his mural at Memorial Junior High. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that Chicano Park was designated a historic landmark by the city within the first 10 years of its establishment. On the national level, it takes 50 years, but you can make the argument right now, like I said, 42 is where you're at, but you can make the argument. So I really appreciated everyone speaking, and I just wanted to remind everybody, when you're looking at those criterias and they talk about in particular sites and properties and primarily focusing on architecture, this is a broader contingency of cultural murals throughout the Southwest. I mean, you could say we are a statewide district. We could say we are a Southwest district of Chicano murals. So just keep that in mind as you go forward. And I think that was the last, the last thing that was brought up by Mr. Drescher. Even in Chicano Park, when we gained some money from the feds to restore some of the most deteriorating murals, some of the images were changed, but it was always recognized that the murals, as Tim was saying, are living documents. That's a living process. They criticized Boteo because he put an earring and the cap backwards. That's a living document, and that's his living document. So if he changed it, he changed it. It's a living document. So anyway, those are the last things that I was going to say. And
thank you, Josie. And I also wanted to add, forgot to add in the closing that I apologize for some of the technical difficulties managing this Zoom. This is with no budget, you guys. We have no budget for this effort. Okay, so we're just doing this out of our pocket here. And so I want to thank Chuck for helping us do this work, as well as Anna Pilhofer for helping behind the scenes. Freddie Jenka was also helping us put this all together. I do see some dignitaries in the room, so I do want to recognize our city council person, Kristen Snedden. Kristen has joined us this morning. Thank you, Kristen.
Can I just say thank you so much for bringing this to all of our attention and your tireless efforts on this. The HLC, I was so appreciative you were there and just bringing this forward. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I think in lieu of interrupting public comment on Tuesday, that you'll just be getting some written correspondence regarding the item. And then I'm pretty sure at the dais, there's enough voices there already to speak up on behalf of what was said this morning. So we're confident in that regard. And we also have our school board member, Ms. Laura Capps, joined us this morning too. So Laura, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much. I learned a ton. Really good.
Okay, good.
And
what's that?
I was just going to make sure you see Council Member Alejandra Gutierrez.
Oh, she opened up the show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
It's okay, but she was there, and like I said, we had some technical difficulties involved. Does anybody else want to say a few words? We have just a few of us left in the room here.
I'm sorry. One more thing, Mark.
Yeah.
When Kieran was making the presentation, and she said that she had 2 weeks, her team had 2 weeks to assess and 1 week to write. That is a total disservice to the public and the Latino community. I mean,
we recognize that. When I met with Kieran after the report was submitted, and she told me that she was staying up till 2, 3 in the morning every night to get this thing delivered on top of her own work, because she's got this wasn't her only project, right? She was trying to shepherd, and this is why she had to call on the team that she did to help her do this work. And I feel for Kieran and her professionalism and her honesty too. She has been pretty transparent with us. We met with her on January 6th when she first got started on this thing, and she came right out and told us that, what you guys have here is very, very special, except that I have a job to do. And so it's been clear that her recommendations were massaged by the city to get where the city wants to go, and not taking everything in spirit to what she was delivering.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for that. And I really just want to, I think one thing that either got lost in how we phrase things in the report or you know, the reproduction on vinyl or on aluminum is not what we were recommending for the murals of significance. That was recreation by the artist. And I know that's, you know, 2 RE words. And so that's something that the whole team is really cognizant of, that we obviously were not clear enough in our report. And I just want to make that clear to everyone that, you know, Dr. Drescher's comments are absolutely 100% right. And, you know, that kind of reproduction does not capture any part of, you know, murals and their intentionality and the community involvement. You know, part of the process of the mural making, you know, the fact that anyone can come by, pick up a paintbrush, add their idea, you know, talk to the artist. It's a group process, you know, definitely what Dr. Drescher said, I feel is so important in the creation process. But we were giving the city options for murals that would be deaccessioned eventually. And again, that, as far as we know, that goes through a public process. So I apologize for not clarifying that terminology in the report better. And that's something that when we go back to HLC, I'll intentionally call that out. So just thank you to everyone again.
I'm going to get to you, Johnny. Right now I see your hand up, but I do want to also recognize Gail Osherenko with the, she found me in another Zoom meeting, was the McCune Foundation. It was an elaborate webinar situation where we were in these different rooms, and she found me and she goes, "Are you Mark Alvarado from Ortega Park?" And I said, "No, that's me." And she goes, "You got to meet my cousin." And I'm like, "Well, who's your cousin?" And she said, "John, can you meet yourself, please?" And she goes, "Who's your cousin?" And I said, and she goes, "Well, she wrote the book." And I'm, "Well, what book?" And she's a Holly Barnett Sanchez is my cousin. You need to meet her. So that was really a godsend, you guys. So, because once Holly got into the picture, Holly spoke to what Josie talks about and what Tim talks about, that these clusters of murals are a collection of, you touch one, you touch them all, from Chicano Park all the way up to San Francisco, just like the California missions. And so it was like a aha moment for me when Holly said that. You know, when you touch one, you touch them all. And then when you talk about community with all the different groups that we have here with us, the Chumash, you know, the Black Lives Matter people, faith-based people, all the different people that are involved, the arts community. So you touch one, you touch all of us with this work. And so I wanted just to recognize Gail. You want to say a few words, Gail, before I turn it over to John?
I just was showing you the book that Holly sent me, that she and Tim did together. And she's opened my eyes. So when I met you in the chat room, it was just one of those serendipitous things. But thank you for the work you're doing. If you know, I'm going to follow this. I've had some interactions with the Parks and Rec over some other parks, and I know how difficult it can be, but let's go back to the drawing board and rethink this park.
Thank you so much. And Holly did send a book to myself, Barbara Parmet, and to Manuel Anzueta. So I still haven't gotten into it. I looked at all the pictures like you always do when you get a book with this full of pictures, right? I said,
it's very good.
Library days.
Very good. And it's good to see you, Holly.
Thank you.
I want John Huerta to speak. He's a Santa Barbara native, a dear friend, big supporter of everything that we do in the community. So John, just go ahead and say a few words as you wanted to.
He's muted.
Yeah, can you unmute yourself, Johnny? There you go. Oh, we lost your image, but go ahead. He's frozen, unfortunately.
Unmuted now, Mark. I saw instruction to unmute.
Okay.
Is it okay to speak briefly?
Go ahead, John.
Just for a few minutes, like a minute or so?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank you and all the community members, scholars, and people involved. I'm very, very passionate about the Ortega Park mural preservation because I remember those murals from when I was a child in the early 80s growing up. And I wanted to thank you and everyone else, and also extend any physical energy or volunteer effort that you might need. You can contact me. And I want to say the murals should be preserved because they're a cultural treasure for our community and for generations to come. It allows the younger generations a window to look through into the past and present and have a sense of identity and purpose and stewardship in their neighborhood. So I'd like to thank you all very much. And once again, save the Parque de Ortega Morales for future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You know, also too, is Ann Hefferman is here with us too. And some of you know Ann. She's a multi-talented artist, musician, and you know, she's a little bashful about it, but she's a neighbor of Ortega Park. She lives across the street from the
You're
park.
welcome, Mark. I have a bad connection. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, it's okay, John. She lives across the street from the park, and she's also highly involved with a lot of efforts here in Santa Barbara around art. So I just wanted to give the floor to Ann a little bit and say a few words. But thank you, Ann, because you've been working behind the scenes too, being a little chispa for me, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. I wanted to add, I have resources at UCSB because I work there in the geospatial collection. So in terms of historical documentation, I'll look for maps showing land ownership, land grants, and aerial photos of the property before the park was built. And should I send those to you, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're gonna do, and I'll just go ahead and disclose this now, we're already in the process of formalizing a committee, what we're already coining as the Ortega Park Mural Rescue Committee. And I've already met with some folks that are, some of them are in this room, and we're just trying to do this correctly. There's an arm that has to communicate with the city, and that has to be done in a way that's articulated and they understand. And so we have, you know, Alejandra and Kristen here with us. And I know they've been with us from the beginning, but as elected officials, they play a different role than city staff plays. And so we want to make sure that those lines of communication aren't blurred as we proceed. So, Ann, you're definitely, you've already been selected to participate on the committee, just so you know. And